I'm here with Miri Sacks at the Western Wall Tunnels. Now, Miri, what is the Western Wall Tunnels?
The Western Wall Tunnels, in order to understand that, we have to go way back in history and understand where it all began. It all begins right over here on a mountain in Jerusalem called Mount Moriah. According to Jewish tradition, the world was founded from the peak of this mountain 5,771 years ago. And this is where lots of the tradition happened, such as the sons of Adam, Cain and Abel, come and bring their offerings at the peak of the mountain. This is the place where Noah comes to after he exits the ark to bring his offerings. This is the same place where the binding of Isaac and the dream of Jacob take place. And this is the location where King David came to Jerusalem and conquered the city. This happens 3,000 years ago. King David's son, King Solomon, builds the first temple at the peak of that very same mountain. That temple is destroyed and years later rebuilt. This we call the first temple, and later on the second temple when it's rebuilt. The Western Wall only comes about at the end of the second temple time. When the temple stands at the peak of the mountain, surrounding the mount, a huge platform is built. This platform you're probably familiar with till today. It's called the Temple Mount, and it's surrounded by 4 walls. These 4 walls are named the Northern, Eastern, Southern, and Western Wall, and that is the Western Wall till today. So the Western Wall itself is actually a retaining wall of the Temple Mount, and actually the Western Wall that we're mostly familiar with today, the exposed part of the wall, is simply 1/8 of the Western Wall. The Western Wall tunnels are a dig alongside the wall, and the reason we need a dig is because there have been homes built right next to the Western Wall in the past 700 years. When we established the State of Israel in 1948, Jerusalem was divided into 2. Literally, there's a wall in the middle of the city. And only 19 years later, during the Six-Day War, we come back to Jerusalem and we get a chance to finally find our history. And that is when we start to dig underneath these homes, of course, constantly reinforcing whatever is here, not harming anyone, and finding our history, but everyone's history here in Jerusalem. And that's the Western Wall tunnels, a walk right alongside the Western Wall. The tour in the Western Wall tunnels begins with a topographical map of Jerusalem and builds on top of the Western Wall and the entire history of Jerusalem. Once we go into the tunnels, we have many different stations along the way showing you what you have just seen at the topographic model. So along the way, you'll be walking under 700-year-old arches, or you'll be looking down at a room that leads back to Jerusalem of 2,800 years ago. For example, you'll be walking underneath a bridge that today holds shops in the Muslim quarter, yet underneath it, it holds 1,300-year-old arches from the early Muslim period. So each and every one of these stations lead us closer and closer into history and closer to the Western Wall. Along the way, you'll be meeting many people in the tunnels. They'll be coming on different tours, or they'll come to pray. And you'd be surprised, they go outside to the Western Wall Plaza normally to pray, but inside the Western Wall tunnels we have a small section designated for women to come inside and pray in days of rain, in days of major sun. So you'll be meeting many different people coming into the tunnels. Now, the visitors here, we're very proud to say, come from all over the world. And I believe this is not by chance. When King Solomon built the first temple, his prayer was, this should be a house of prayer for all nations. And his prayer was, anyone that comes to this place, may his prayer be accepted regardless of whether he's worthy of it or not. And I believe that that is what brings us here today to Jerusalem, everyone. And people come and pray from all around the world. As we continue alongside into the tunnels, we reach an electronic model of the temple and the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. There you'll be able to learn about the history that happened throughout the years and actually see and understand more deeply what the temple was and what it meant to the Jewish nation. I have to tell you that we used to come here from all around the world 2,000 years ago and even 3,000 years ago to see Jerusalem and pilgrim to Jerusalem on the different holidays. Until today, 2,000 years later, we have an opportunity to do it. The first half of the tour, I would say, leads you towards the Western Wall. I believe this is not by chance. When we used to go up to the Temple Mount, and you'd have to prepare yourself physically and spiritually beforehand. So here, when we get a chance to come to the Holy Western Wall, we get a chance to prepare ourselves, and thus half of the tour leads us till that point. Once we reach the Western Wall itself, we meet up with the wall, we meet up with the history of the wall itself, and we start walking alongside the wall. Once we reach the Western Wall, we actually get an opportunity to understand the history of Jerusalem. This is literally, the history is written on the wall. We begin with stones, the first layer of stones that we can see that lead us back to the Herodian time in Jerusalem, that is 2,000 years old. And we later on carry up to the closer generations to us, early Muslim period that could be 1,300 years old, but in Jerusalem that's almost yesterday. And we carry on and we see the Western Wall is actually a mosaic of what happened in Jerusalem. It tells us the history just by standing. And for example, if you look at the Western Wall, you could see frames etched on each and every one of these stones indicating this is the signature of King Herod. We also have a magnificent thing here, and I think probably a very rare thing in the Western Wall tunnels. There's one very, very large stone here, and not only that it is so large, but it is incredibly heavy. This stone is the third heaviest in the world. It's 4.6 meters deep and 13.5 meters long. This is one massive stone, and what is most impressive about it is that probably the heaviest stone in the world that is actually on top of a building. In other words, it's in its actual location. And when most people come here, they're very impressed by the weight and the size and so on. And I don't know if I want to ruin it and tell people how much it actually weighs, but it's quite a few hundred tons. And when you come and visit here, you'll hear the entire story of the stone itself. What amazes me more is the top of the stone. The top of the stone is not a perfectly etched stone. And at the time of King Herod, he would never put up with that. What we see on this stone is the actual destruction of Jerusalem that happened in the year 70. When the Romans came to Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, they not only wanted to destroy the temple itself, but its surroundings as well. We find that they bury much of the Jewish existence of Jerusalem. And when they come to the Western Wall and they're not able to move this hundreds of tons of stones, instead of dropping the stones from the Western Wall, they actually start etching and destroying the stones. That's how much they tried to bury the existence here in Jerusalem. And looking at it today, when you can actually see the destruction that happened here 2,000 years ago, I mean, you actually see the history right in front of your eyes. You see the stories that you've learned all these years, and we get a chance to stand right in front of it. Once you start walking alongside the Western Wall, we're going to see the Western Wall on our right-hand side along the entire way, almost till the end of the Western Wall tunnels. Along the way, we walk right near an ancient gate that used to lead up to the Temple Mount. But as the entire Jerusalem and as the Western Wall, this gate, of course, also has a history of its own. And when we used to come to Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, this is one of the places we would ascend to the Temple Mount from. Throughout the years, we were forbidden to stand in Jerusalem, and even though we very much yearned to stand in this place, we weren't always physically able to. But when we did get a chance, there was a synagogue built in this gate. When you stand across the gate, it will be a little bit difficult to actually realize you're standing by a gate because it is blocked. This has been blocked for the last 900 years, and ever since then we did not have a chance to go into this gate again. But we did continue digging alongside the Western Wall, and we found a beautiful, beautiful spot alongside the wall. Often this spot you'll be able to notice according to the women sitting at this place. Some of the women come here at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and say the entire book of Psalms. They say the entire morning prayers, or they sit here all day and say different prayers that have different meanings, sometimes Kabbalistic meanings behind it. These very righteous women will come here daily. We sometimes find brides and grooms here asking for their future life to be successful and healthy in many ways. We sometimes find people who come here to pray for health, for anything it is. And specifically at this place alongside the Western Wall, because this location is 97 meters away from where the Holy of Holies stood. Inside the temple there were many different rooms. Each room had its purpose. As you walk further and further into the temple, you get to holier sites. Only one man was allowed to walk into that room called the Holy of Holies one day a year. That day was called Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. And that is the exact location where all that history we spoke about before happened. That is the exact location where the world was founded from, where Cain and Abel brought their offerings, Noah brought his offerings, the binding of Isaac, the dream of Jacob. That is the location that King David conquered before his son King Solomon built a temple there. And as a Jewish person, I could tell you that from all around the world, we pray towards, physically and spiritually, towards this location. And if we're standing in Jerusalem, we pray towards Jerusalem, as close as we can get to this place. But as we mentioned before, not only Jewish people come and pray at the Western Wall. The Western Wall is open to the entire public. And ever since we got an opportunity to open the Western Wall in 1967, we've opened the doors to everyone to come to pray here, to pray their prayers, to pray what they would like to pray. And you could see that indicated by the notes at the Western Wall. We do not read the notes. The notes are taken out of the Western Wall twice a year and brought to burial on the Mount of Olives. These are treated as a prayer book that has been damaged. We do not throw them out. We take them for burial. So this specific location alongside the Western Wall is what we call a direct call home. This is the exact location right across that holy place. And there's a saying in Hebrew, "Acharei ha'ma'asim nimshachim halevavot." Our hearts follow our actions. And when we physically stand at this place, something about our hearts open up. I can tell you that right now from standing at this exact location now. I don't know if you feel it, but
It's an amazing place, isn't it?
it's unbelievable. And the most unique things, I think, happen to people from just coming to the site, putting away all the troubles of the day and stopping and saying a short prayer. But I have to tell you that it's a very special thing to pray just here. We know that when King Solomon built the temple and asked for God to accept everyone's prayers, you would have expected King Solomon to ask for wealth and health for himself and his family. Instead, he asked for the entire nation. King David does the same thing. He's constantly asking for the nation. And this is what we see that the leaders did. The leaders tried to tell us 3,000 years ago that when we stop and pray, we first must pray for others. Once we have others in mind, we could then return and think about ourselves and ask, of course, for ourselves. And may all your prayers be accepted from this place. It's a magnificent thing. You go touring, and in the middle of the tour, you stop and put everything aside and just stand and pray. And we encourage everyone who comes to the Western Wall tunnels to stop and do what they do at the Western Wall, whether it is to pray, place a note, or just stand silently out of respect to this place. Once we continue, we start the walk alongside the Western Wall. This is the major tunnel that leads us about 250 meters alongside the Western Wall tunnels, where on the right-hand side, as we mentioned, we see the Western Wall, the original 2,000-year-old Herodian stones. And on the other side, we see concrete. This concrete was simply placed to reinforce what is on top of the homes. And the pathway we're going to walk through is relatively narrow. It's the width of a wheelbarrow, just enough to have cleared out all the dirt and debris that accumulated here in the last 700 years. And of course was sifted out to find findings. And the height is approximately the height of the tallest man that dug in this location. As we start walking inside the Western Wall tunnels, that 250-meter walk alongside the wall, we'll see two glass windows along the way. In the first glass window, we can see the actual destruction that happened in Jerusalem in the year 70 of the Common Era. And you can see the actual stones, the actual 2,000-year-old stones that were pushed down from the wall during the destruction. They remain here till today, and we haven't dug them out yet. But potentially underneath there, we can dig down maybe 8 meters till we get till the bedrock. So there's still much more work to do. But I have to tell you that with all the excavations that we've done here alongside the Western Wall and in the Western Wall area, this is our prime location. We do not dig underneath the Temple Mount or on the Temple Mount. Let it be for political reasons or for other reasons, but mainly for religious reasons. According to the Jewish law, we're not allowed to go up to the Temple Mount today. We do not have the means to properly purify. And that is why we come to the Western Wall, because the Western Wall is the closest that we can get to the holiest place in the world, where the Holy of Holies sat. And in the second window, as we walk alongside the wall, we're able to look down and see the Western Wall carrying down till the bedrock. When you stand on it, it will seem pretty deep to you. But have in mind, the Western Wall is built on a slope of a mountain, very high up north, very low down south. That means when you're standing at the Western Wall Plaza outside, you have underneath you maybe 3 times the depth of what you see here, maybe 20 or 25 meters of Western Wall that still have not been excavated. Okay. As you continue alongside the wall, you'll walk through 2 small rooms. These rooms are actually not rooms per se, they're water cisterns that we cut through in order to dig alongside the wall. You'll see the plaster on the walls, and you'll be able to see the openings, the original openings to the homes that are, of course, now sealed as we have running water. You continue a little bit more, of course, alongside these Herodian stones to see the actual bedrock. This is the bedrock rising up from underneath the Western Wall, and this is the first time that we get an opportunity to see the real thing, to see where it all began. This is the actual mountain where God said to Abraham, stop. This is actually the same place where the offerings were brought, on the top of this mountain. And we get to touch it and stand right alongside it and see what was done to it throughout the years. When we reach what seems to be the end of the tunnel, just the end of the more narrow tunnel within the Western Wall tunnels, we reach part of a street. The street looks more like a room today. It has a ceiling, it has walls, it has a floor, but it's actually, as we see at the Western Wall, a mosaic of history. The ceiling and most of the walls are arches holding up the homes of the Muslim quarter. And we can see as we walk in on our left-hand side, 2 beautiful columns that remained here from the time of the Second Temple. Why there are columns suddenly alongside the Western Wall? Well, the answer is actually in the floor that we're standing on right now. There's beautiful pavement, actual beautiful pavement stones, that as you walk into this room, you realize you're standing on the original Wall Street of 2,000 years ago. This was the marketplace where people used to come and do their shopping from out of town or in town itself. And on the different holidays when we pilgrim to Jerusalem, this is the place that we'd stand on. So the actual marketplace of Jerusalem still exists till today, and we see a small segment of it here in the tunnels themselves. As you walk in, you'll see on your right-hand side the Western Wall and the bedrock that we already met rising from underneath it. But in some segments of the Western Wall here, you can see what happened to the stone. You can see that King Herod decided to dress the stone by building rectangles. Not really building them, but kind of etching rectangles into the bedrock itself, making it look as if they were stones. It saves a lot of work, and it's actually beautiful. And if I say it's beautiful today, imagine what it looked like 2,000 years ago. Something happened at this street, though. In the middle of the street, you meet bedrock. Not very typical for King Herod, not very convenient for anyone coming here. We see in the bedrock itself an etching of actual carving in the stone. This happens when King Herod died. In the year 4 before Common Era, King Herod dies and leaves everything behind. Josephus Flavius tells us there were 18,000 unemployed people after Herod's death. Could you only imagine that? So when he leaves, everyone just left their tools behind, went home, and stopped working on the street. Only 54 years later was the street completed. So when King Herod dies, it's all left behind. But years later, the street is active. Now, when does the street come to an end? With the destruction of Jerusalem. In the year 70, when the Romans come, they destroy the entire city. The Jewish people fled. They have no choice but to stay here. And I always picture between these 2 arches, standing in the street, there might have been a shop. And in this shop, this one person who owns a shop here and says, what do I do? Do I leave everything behind? Do I leave Jerusalem, my heart? Or do I stay? They chose to leave, but to leave their hearts in Jerusalem. And it's amazing to know that they took Jerusalem with them to everywhere they scattered throughout the years. The Jewish people scattered to 70 different countries, they say, 4 corners of the world. And throughout the years, the yearning to Jerusalem, the love to the city, the love to Jerusalem just grew further and further and further. And I think it actually was the strongest in the year 1967, because that is the year that after 2,000 years of yearning, we got an opportunity during the Six-Day War to come back to the Western Wall. And right afterwards, the digging. And I would love to have seen that guy's face who owned the store here. See us returning back here 2,000 years later. He probably wouldn't have believed that then. I mean, it's actually amazing to be standing on the street. It's actually, I've been here 10 years, and every time I get excited. At this point, you're nearing the end of the tour, where you meet the actual quarry where they carved stones for the Western Wall. We have a simple animated movie at this point explaining how they probably brought these massive stones to the Western Wall. You continue a bit more alongside the Western Wall, but then are forced to turn left. We never actually completed the excavation of the Western Wall, and this is simply because the Western Wall was never completely built. We do not know of an existing corner, I'd say western, northern corner of the Western Wall, maybe because we never found it or maybe because it was never built. In the early 90s, a bit after we opened the Western Wall tunnels, we continued the excavation alongside the wall. Up till then, you'd walk till this point and walk back to the Western Wall Plaza. But at this point, we felt wind coming from a certain point. There was a draft coming in, and we decided to tour and see where it takes us to. And that was a wonderful decision, because we make a left at that point, walking through an ancient aqueduct. This aqueduct goes back at least 2,200 years to the days of the Maccabees in Jerusalem, maybe even from King Solomon. This man-made aqueduct used to lead water from northern pools in Jerusalem into the Temple Mount itself. It was only partially closed down by King Herod by building a dam only years later. But till then it was active and brought water to the temple. And you have to realize when the temple stood, you need water for many different purposes. You need for cleanliness, you need for rituals, you need for mikvahs, for ritual baths, for every different purpose. This is the holiest place in the world. And Jerusalem, what can we do? Does not have a lot of water naturally. So we were very happy to find this evidence of how the actual life was in Jerusalem at the time. But when King Herod closed it, he built a pool, and that is the next room we walk into. This is the pool that collected water coming from the different pools and prevented it from coming to the Western Wall once it was built. Now, when you walk in there, you're going to see a very small segment of the pool. In front of you, you will see a wall, and on the other side of the wall is the monastery of the Sisters of Zion. You can go visit there. You just have to simply walk outside and ask to walk into the basement of that monastery, and you will see probably 2/3 of the pool on the other side. The reason there's a wall there is simply because the monastery did not know what the Western Wall tunnels are 150 years ago. It wasn't dug yet. And they knew that there was a pool and did not know where it led to, so they decided to close it off to prevent unwanted guests coming in. So that is a story of that 150-year-old wall. But as that wall, every step in Jerusalem has a story. Wherever you walk, there's a story to tell, or even a few stories built one on top of another. The exit of the Western Wall Tunnel leads out to Via Dolorosa Street. This was opened in 1996 and enabled us, thank God, to bring many, many more visitors to come and see the Western Wall Tunnels. From this point on, visitors could continue to Via Dolorosa Street. They can choose to return back to the Western Wall Plaza or just walk around as they choose. So this is the basic tour of the Western Wall Tunnels. I'm sure there will be much more to see in years to come as the excavation is still happening and still going on, and we're constantly still finding more findings, whether it is a coin, a seal that goes back 2,800 years with ancient Hebrew writing on it, or a piece of pottery, or even one room where we found clay, actual clay that you can still build with, and this is 1,300 years old. So this is just the beginning, what you see here, a walk alongside history, but we call it a walk into the past, but towards the future. And the most important thing, I think, to come out of here from this place is that as we're walking alongside our past, as we're walking alongside history of a nation, we have to remember that we have to pick up from it what we need to learn. We have to learn for the future. And I think everyone walks out with their own direction, but as we say, welcome back to 2011 when we exit.
Now, you have a website for people who'd like to know more. What's your website address?
The website is thekotel.org. That's thekotel.org. And on this website, you can actually see the Western Wall live. We have a live cam at the Western Wall 24/6, as we say, as it is not active on the Sabbath. And we have a wonderful opportunity for people to write notes and send them through our website, and they're placed daily at the Western Wall. If you don't have internet and only have an iPhone, you have an opportunity to download the Western Wall app. You can send a note sitting in the metro, and within moments it's received here at the Western Wall and placed within the stones. So really, you're standing in a place with so much history, but there's so much future and so much technology that we build within the history. And I think that's our addition to history. In years to come, people will look back at us. We're going to be history. So in years to come.
Well, thank you very much for sharing.
Pleasure.